What an unfortunate game. Atomic Heart's claim to fame is the hot robot twins you shouldn't Google, and the shaders, and the fact that developers are Russians when the Russian government decided to start its Imperial project. I've been playing Atomic Hearts recently, and it's one of the most inconsistent games I've played in a long while. At times, it's genuinely good, with great world building, fantastic setting, and music that can make any fight fun, which was made by Mick Gordon himself. Other times, it's writing so vapid I feel like I'm rereading the worst sections in my old books that had stolen speeches from The Walking Dead. Or it's the worst character ever put to screen with such unbearable writing that for the first time ever I turned off the sound so I didn't have to watch it. And with mission design so bad, it basically revolves to get 4 things so you can do a thing. Oops, you didn't actually need those 4 things. You need a different 5th thing. In fact, the first 4 hours are a perfect example of this. Excellent animations and meshes are put on full display by having you sit on a boat, unable to do anything. Then you're literally told to walk forward for roughly 10 minutes. Get inside a massive towering building to grab one thing from the Humna Humna robots by going up a 30-second long elevator where nothing happens, just to get back inside of a car which takes you on a literal tour of the entire map. All in all, after an entire hour of game time, the gameplay amounted to walking down a hallway, cutscene, walking down a hallway, cutscene, walking down a hallway, cutscene. Even when it seems like the game could let go of the reins and let you fight, too often it doesn't. The rest of the 3 hours aren't much better. The protagonist is a complete blank slate, and I think it's by design. Like the player, he is also infuriated when he's given countless fetch quests. The problem with him is his dialogue isn't all that good. When I think about a facility where robots went mad and killed everyone, I don't think of a person delivering one-liners and zingers while surrounded by corpses. I think, coincidentally, Dead Space and BioShock. Alright, this opening has been a bit all over the place, so I need to center it a bit. I'll be talking first about the opening and how the story, gameplay and all that was like there, because trust me, those 4 hours deserve their own section. First, the gameplay. It's nothing special. The abilities you have access to, like telekinesis, shock, and freezing enemies, seem tailor-made for plasmids and work quite well. They have good sound effects and particles, and generally there's no delay to them. And the game does have a nice variety of weapons, complemented by a streamlined looting system that's just insanely fun to use. If you press F, you will pull objects towards you, which forces open drawers and chests, and the animation combined with the sound effects makes it really cool. The guns also work quite well. The shotgun has a hell of a punch to it, and all of the guns have great sound design. My problem generally with the gameplay starts off with primarily with the speed, which I know sounds kind of weird. It's something I'm not even sure how to define properly myself, but if I were to try, I think is that the combat system feels like a strange mix of survival horror with standard action. You have a dodge ability, and enemies sometimes have attacks which require you to dodge, but you, the character, despite the telekinesis, despite the electric shock and freeze ray, move much slower than everyone else. You move like Leon moves in Resident Evil 2, slowly and clunky, which feels completely wrong for the combat experience the game seems to want you to have. Yes, there is an upgrade to increase your speed, but it doesn't fix the problem entirely. It also doesn't help that the first 4 hours you fight one enemy type, a robot which attacks with melee only and can be two-shotted by the only firearm you don't need to craft. And also its movement speed in every other enemy is faster than yours. This strange sort of dissonance is prevalent in the story as well. When the robots go hostile and kill people, you see an old lady angrily and furiously shooting down dozens of flying robots, causing explosions and chaos, which is then followed by your fall into a bunker where you see dozens of corpses and blood on the wall as the music winds down and the horror atmosphere is built, which is only reinforced when you enter a hallway, hear a woman's voice humming a song through a door at the end of it, and dozens of corpses are withering the hallway, and even more are disturbingly hung up with some sort of wiring, only for you to step through the door at the end and find that the source of the humming is an aggressively horny sex bot that sells you upgrades. What the fuck? This is the moment I mentioned in the beginning where I turned off the sound. I'm sorry, but a robot that likes to get dominated is only funny to 14-year-olds. And what makes this moment so bizarre is that the scene where it gets introduced is incredibly well animated. Someone spent maybe a year of development working on and animating a scene which is nothing but grating and cringe-inducing. This is doubly bizarre by the fact that, after 2 more encounters with it, it disappears from the game entirely, and the upgrade bot, which has the same model and I'd assume same voice, gives you just a standard vendor line. You gotta admire the fucking dedication. Spend an insane amount of time on an insanely well animated intro cutscene for the worst joke character put to screen, only to dump this character later on. It's funnier because in my playthrough the protagonist makes a comment about hating having to meet this sex bot again, but it's just a standard upgrade bot. The protagonist is oftentimes equally grating. He yells at his glove a lot for no reason, really, and it isn't helped by the piss-poor translation. The game is set in Russia, and the developers, being Russian, wrote the script in Russian, so there are a ton of just Russian expressions and idioms that were just directly translated to English, losing any and all meaning that they have. I do have some sympathy for the translators. Russian is not an easy language to translate, but indulge me a moment. In a post-Metro world, Russo-English translators shouldn't be that hard to find, especially since the English translation of Last Light is no different to standard games from the West. More so, Mundfish, during the development of Atomic Hearts, was better off financially than 4A games during Metro 2033. And even in that game, I couldn't tell you it had poor dubbing or translation, while Atomic Hearts suffers from poor voice actors and poor translators. Back to the protagonist. There's the overuse of crispy critters, yelling at a glove I just cannot give a damn about one way or the other, or particularly in the opening 4 hours, tell me more about X dialogue. The voice actor for him is not all that good, with nearly all scenes of him speaking with the same inflection as me in these videos. There is so much exposition in the opening, it's unreal. It's like I'm taking a course on fucking Atomic Hearts. Listen, I love history, and have been studying to take exams recently, partly why there's been so few videos. Sorry about that. So I'm back to stuffing my face in textbooks, and they explain in excruciating detail everything that's happened. It oftentimes makes reading history just fucking boring. Studying about the Russian Revolution is fun if you read about Tsar Nicholas' failures and how much of a weirdo he was, and more so if you can do it like a narrative. Case in point, half of every history YouTuber on this goddamn site. But it's not fun if you're just vomited all the facts, like a textbook. And for Atomic Hearts, 90% of the dialogue, particularly in the opening, was just that. Vomiting facts and trivia about the world, which I get, this is your setting, Not based on anything else, but there are far better ways to teach the player about your world. Feel confident enough that your players will want to learn about the collective, and how the facility came to be, what the brown plague is. Don't just vomit all of it in the opening hours and expect them to not be horribly disoriented and confused. I have to bring up Metro again, particularly Exodus' best chapter, the Volga. In it, your primary antagonists are the Cult of the Czarfis and the Bandits. Now, bandits don't really need to be established. They're basically a constant in every post-apocalyptic game. But a religious cult, that does need to be established. And how does Metro Exodus establish them? It doesn't. You literally break through their blockade and gradually learn more about them as you explore the area. Anna doesn't immediately drop into a monologue explaining who and what they are in excruciating detail. Listen, I'm railing this game pretty hard, and it's because I seriously did not like the first 4 hours of this game. I mean, you find out that there's this sci-fi tech that captures the consciousness of a person after they die, which is a fucking terrifying concept. And after you introduce that incredible horror element, you follow it with a Call of Duty set piece, where you jump on a platform with speeds up out of control before crashing. Not the last time that would happen. And this concept is also not fully developed. Are they aware that they died and want to help survivors however they can? Or are they not even aware that they died and are stuck in some sort of loop repeating the same phrases from their day-to-day life? Or do they think they're alive but just running scared? Some of these corpses are even used for jokes, for Christ's sake. The game fails to clearly establish the rules with this concept, which ironically makes it one of the few elements in this setting that I'd like to learn more about. The final hour of the opening is the most disappointing. You need 4 canisters to open the exit, already a pretty simple and kind of overused design, but it's saved a little bit by the fact that for each one you need to do different things. The last canister is in the pesticide workshop, and it's immediately apparent that the team here wanted to pay their respects to the hydroponics section in Dead Space 1. The area is visually unique, and so are the enemies. Though bear in mind that the lack of enemy variety is still present here. Though they may be humans, they behave like the robots you fought hundreds of times over. You are told by a disposable meat bag that the last canister is being held by a giant carnivorous plant, which is sleeping, but if a gas doesn't hit it in time, it will wake up. So after a lengthy puzzle section to get the plant some more gas, it kinda fails, and it inevitably does wake up. Alright, this will be a hell of a boss fight, and a great way to cap off the search for the 4 It's killed in the cutscene. Not even by your hand. What was the point? What was the point of all that setup of making that snazzy looking monster model if it'll be on screen for exactly 30 seconds? I mean, it's not out of character for the developers. They made an incredible looking skyscraper with detailed interiors fully modeled from every side to be used for 2 minutes. It's disappointing from a player's perspective and a genuine waste of your time and resources to make such a good looking model for a 30-second cutscene set piece. What's more ridiculous is that after what clearly should have been the boss fight to tie up the opening, you have an actual boss fight against a slightly larger zombie with its consciousness trapped. There's no narrative reason for it. You're running back to the canisters when the doors closed for no reason, and it spawns in the room. The blueprint was right there, Munfish. All you had to do was commit to it. But that's the end of the opening. Once you finally get to the surface, things are surprisingly better. There's enemy variety that forces you to behave differently than just run at the enemy and 2-tap them with a shotgun. The quest design is improved mildly. The exposition dialogue finally mostly ends, and there is even a cutscene that intrigues me and gets me invested in the story. And the first boss on the surface was actually teased effectively and had a proper lead up, with 2 previous appearances that disrupt your actions. And he also has a visually unique, fun, and intimidating design. If you see a giant metal ball rolling towards you at Mach fucking 10, you'll be scared. And the fight was appropriately challenging as well. Don't get me wrong, the translation is consistently bad. The mission design still suffers from get me 3 correct things that turn out to be pointless because you need a separate thing somewhere else. Case in point, getting the train tickets. The robot here tells you you need a train ticket from the booth to get it running. But everyone's dead, so you go around finding any available train tickets from corpses. But they either for some reason are uncooperative, so we can't route them, or have outdated train tickets. Literally one of the tickets you can get if the being refused, it was from 2 hours before you got to that location. Until, casually, after you bring him 3 things, the robot mentions that there is a 1-month pass that is a viable way to get the train running. Do these 3 pointless things before I tell you how to actually progress the story. That's the most obvious padding I've seen in a long while. And that isn't the only time it happens. Later on, you need to activate a drill, but the robot there refuses to do so until you can prove you're a human by bringing it 3 objects. And then, you guessed it, it tells you it can't activate the drill. So you're forced to follow this robot that's slower than your walking speed through a hallway and have to stop at times for her to deliver more exposition about another robot type. I'm back in the fucking classroom. The dialogue issues also continue. Your glove, which was manufactured by the Soviet Union, at a certain point starts criticizing the guy who made it. What world are these guys living in that the Soviet Union was such a perfect utopia? The scientists who develop a sentient glove don't add in checks to prevent it from criticizing its creators and challenging the assumptions of the highly effective and deadly officer who uses it. Mundfish received funding from some pretty high-profile companies, and it fucking shows. This world is so incredibly well realized, it fucking earned those animation awards. And the dedication to having everything modeled and detailed is unreal. It's equally impressive as to how well optimized the game is. Despite some minor visual bugs or places where I got stuck, the game never once crashed, never dropped below 60 frames, and in an era where developers are increasingly forgetting about optimization and why certain techniques even existed, it is a sight to behold to see developers truly optimize their game, not just pretend they did with DLSS or other features. Just humor me a moment. Metro Last Light had 4 different shirts it repeated ad nauseum throughout the game. The buildings you see in Bioshock are literally 2D, and in Metro Exodus, you've seen what Artyom's face actually looks like from the front. It's Duke. And one of my favorite levels of that game, Yamantau, is Last Light's D6 just given a facelift and a few new props. And these games are all fantastic. I'm sorry, I know I almost consistently paraphrase other YouTubers, but it's going to happen again. This was said quite well by Up Is Not Jump. I just can't help that they're better than me and more attractive. When you put something into a game, you'll have to cheap out on something else. It's the inevitable reality of game development. You cannot afford to make every aspect of your game great. That's why Doom has a below average story. That's why New Vegas has an inferior atmosphere to Fallout 3 and equally bad combat. And it's why Last of Us 1's gameplay is simplistic. The focus on each of those games is something else, and is why they're so highly regarded. And Atomic Heart's focus is clearly on the impressive models and impressive animations, which does deserve merit, but ultimately graphics are not what makes the game, it's how much fun you have with it. And if the combat and gameplay aren't that special, I didn't talk about it, but there is pointless parkouring, and the plot is far too often poorly written and downright bad, and the mission design and seesaws from average to downright infuriating, how are graphics supposed to save such a game? They aren't. Thanks for watching.
Only try to be gentle, Comrade Major. I have very